Welcome to the Commissioner's Report. Today we're going to continue a conversation with the Commissioner of District 3 here, Bill Braswell. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, last time we were on the show, we talked about fresh produce,
Right.
and how a lot of your fresh produce isn't really fresh.
Right.
And there's a lot more to the story about farming than just produce. I mean, it's a massive industry. It's America's number one commerce.
Fresh produce is just a very small portion of it. When you take in cattle and pork and grains, I mean, it's a huge industry.
Now, there are a lot of pressures on this industry of farming, and of course, different types of farming have different types of pressures, but it's almost kind of like everything is connected in a way, right?
Well, yeah, and it's kind of connected to fuel because we use a lot of fuel. It's not an option. It's used not just to run equipment, it's used to dry fertilizer, it's used to make chemicals.
Right.
And when the oil prices went up, it really threw everything into chaos. And the other thing is these large chemical companies have consolidated globally, and hardly anything's produced in the U.S. anymore. So DuPont, these guys are outside of the country now. So what they produce, now it has to be shipped over here, which is just even more cost.
Yeah.
So it's all interconnected, and basically it's all bad.
Now, when we talk about fuel prices being connected to farming, just kind of make that connection for us. What all does fuel go into when dealing with farmers?
First of all, everything either goes off a farm and to a grocery store off a truck, right?
Transport.
We're talking about a rail strike here, possibly tonight. I think it's been averted. But if that was to happen, most of your grain crops all go by rail. But yeah, fuel is not just the tractors, it's the pumps. Again, it's the chemicals that are used. And then, you know, the goal, I think, of our country right now is to go solar and electric and wind and all that. And it's just not even practical for agriculture. It's like we were talking, you can't have your tractor, 2 miles from the nearest outlet and go recharge it. It just doesn't work.
So over the last year here, we've seen gas prices climb higher and higher and higher. Thankfully, we're on a little bit of a reprieve, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to last. There are obviously a lot of global pressures that are factoring in. When it comes to farmers here in Florida, high gas prices really affect those small farmers, doesn't it?
Well, it does, and keep in mind, I think Florida is the 4th largest producer of cattle in the U.S. We don't raise cattle here, fatten them up, and slaughter them. We send them off to the Midwest where the corn is. So how this is all interconnected, so now you've got the transportation costs out there much higher, but the corn prices have doubled in the last year. One thing you're seeing is a lot of ranchers are getting out of the cattle business, or at least they're reducing the size of their herds. They can't afford to feed them anymore. Yeah. And so that's why you see beef prices going up right now. Well, what's actually happening, there's kind of a liquidation of the cattle coming into the market. So the price has gone up a little bit based on the fuel and wages and stuff like that. But then next year what you're going to see is a lot fewer cattle there to slaughter. And now you're talking scarcity and prices going sky high.
And this is a problem, especially for small farmers, which there really aren't that many anymore, right? Because I mean, there's no fluctuation there. If you run a small operation and you suddenly have a 10% cut in profits, that's a huge deal for a small.
You can't afford to be a small farmer anymore. It just doesn't work. The math doesn't work. It's about efficiency and size. I can tell you, as a blueberry farmer here in Florida, when I was president of the state association, we had 500 blueberry farmers just in Florida. We're down to less than 100 now. So, we're down to 20% of what we had, and that's just a few years ago. And what's happening? The big farming operations, they're coming in, they buy things up, or they put so much pressure on the small farm they can't stay in business. And that's really what's putting most people out of business. The big farms just run you right out of business.
So, I mean, as far as farming here in Florida go, there are all these kind of let's just be realistic. There's some downward pressures on farming. What is the prognosis for farmers in Florida?
Well, the citrus industry is dead.
Yeah, they're selling off land to fire sale.
Yeah, and the reason is there's a pest, a bug that infects the tree with a virus, and there's no cure for it. So I believe I saw the crop is down to like 5 million boxes or 40. Anyway, it's like 10% of what it was just 10 years ago. So that's gone. Like I said, cattle, which we're big in here in Florida, it's losing steam real fast. So, and then you've got the growth in Florida, people moving here. A couple of things. First of all, the farmers can make a lot of money selling out. Yeah. And then the other thing, and I've experienced this myself, they move out near you. They want to be in the country, but they don't realize the country is loud and it smells. And so they really don't want to live next to a farm, even though they thought they did. And then they bring lawsuits against you and just make your life miserable after that. So, I mean, it's a consolidation, it's an expense. And the other thing is competition. You've got this foreign competition that we really can't deal with. Yeah.
So that's a lot of what's happening with citrus. How about the cattle farmers? I mean, you were talking about the liquidation. What's it like for cattle farmers?
Well, again, it's if you have cows to sell, you've got to feed them. The feed is going up 200%, 300%, 400% every year. You can't afford that. So even though you can sell the meat, there is a limit to what people will pay for things. You're not going to pay, $50 for a hamburger. You just simply can't do that. So it gets to that limiting factor, and that's money. And so it's just get out of business. That's your only alternative.
What do you think would be, if you had all the powers in the world, what would you do to change the prognosis for farming? Farming is vital to society in general. Well, what would you do to change these factors?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things I would do, but I mean, we have to eat, and we have to, first of all, kind of like from our first segment last month or whenever that was, we have to realize that we have to feed ourselves and depend on ourselves to feed us. We can't depend on foreign countries to feed us, because just like the Russians are playing with the natural gas in Europe, other countries could play with our food. So we have to recognize that we have to manage it and grow it and take care of it here locally. Then, I mean, there's so many factors, but we have to also recognize we have to be efficient. And the idea of the small farm, it's got a little romantic, side to it, and we think that's cool. But it's not realistic anymore. And so we have to accept that factory farming, which is a bad term, but it's a real term that we need to accept, has to be done that way. And then we have to protect the farmers from some of the environmental regulations are crazy. You can't deal with them. And again, going back to the foreign imports, we have to somehow limit them or deal with them in another way with tariffs or whatever, because when the Mexican government doesn't restrict anything, they can use whatever pesticide, whatever chemical, do whatever they want,
whatever low wages,
treat their labor however they want. We can't compete with that. So we got a lot of strikes against us, but we'll see what happens.
Well, Commissioner Braswell, it's always interesting talking to you about farming. You really know your stuff, and appreciate the insight that you bring to Polk County and all that you do for us.
Look forward to the next one.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, thanks.
And thank you for joining us here on the Commissioner's Report. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching. For more information, go to polk-county.net.